About a year ago, I got married and moved into a new apartment near the house where my brother, his wife, and my niece live. I thought it was just perfect since the neighborhood seemed safe. At first, everything was going smoothly, but about the week before last, the lady 2 doors down started to get uncomfortably close, and honestly, it's just creepy. David and I are both first-time married and we're working couples without kids yet. So, we're not really involved in the community, but we're close with my brother's family, and since our houses are near, we often spend weekends together. The trouble started when we went to a certain burger joint with my brother's family. We were talking about what to do for lunch when my niece, who's in first grade, begged us to go there because a toy that comes with the meal set was the talk of her class. My husband and I like fast food, so as long as my brother and his wife were fine with it, we were all in. While we were waiting for our orders, feeling pleased with the toy set meals, my brother and his wife asked if we could watch our niece while they went to buy some necessities from the pharmacy next door. We agreed without hesitation. Our niece was happily waiting at the counter for her toy, not looking like she'd run off anywhere, so it seemed all good. Then, while we three were waiting, holding hands near the counter, I heard a strange boy's voice saying, "Isn't that Lucy?" I looked at my husband, and he didn't recognize the voice either. Our niece then exclaimed, "Oh, it's Nick." We looked around and saw a boy about her age waving from near the register. "He's in my class." But the first impression wasn't great. The boy was wearing a badly worn, ill-fitting t-shirt. I didn't want to meddle in my niece's friendships, but something didn't feel right. It wasn't that he was wearing three-quarter sleeves or anything, it just looked like he was still wearing clothes too small for him. He was very thin, so they weren't exactly tight around the torso. The boy was with his mom, and after they ordered, they came over to say hello. "Hello. Hi, hello. Hello. You're Nick's mom from 2 doors down, right?" Honestly, I'm not used to parental interactions, so I got a bit flustered when greeting her, but my husband didn't skip a beat. He recognized her immediately, and I was surprised. When I took a better look, it was indeed her. Despite her son's worn-out look, Nick's mother was dressed in what seemed like the latest chic fashion, complete with what appeared to be a designer bag, and I was taken aback. "Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Moss, do you have a child?" "No, she's my brother's daughter." "Oh wow. That's so sweet of you to look after your niece on your day off. It's so nice to see siblings getting along well." Nick's mother had a loud, fast way of talking, like she used to be a party girl, with a raspy voice that suggested a liking for cigarettes and alcohol. I just wanted to leave, but our order hadn't arrived yet. And since my niece was happily chatting with Nick, we couldn't just ignore them, so we ended up listening to Nick's mother's non-stop chatter, which felt like a real ordeal. When we moved into the apartment, we made a cursory round of neighborly greetings, but we hadn't really interacted with anyone since. We didn't have children, we both worked, and we just didn't have any points of connection. But since that incident, it's like Nick's mother has zeroed in on me. She now stops me for a chat whenever I'm taking out the trash before heading to work, trying to engage in long conversations when I really don't have the time. I mean, nobody has spare minutes before work, right? Missing the train would be disastrous. I used to stop out of politeness, but I can't do that every time, especially when she's being too familiar for comfort. Every time she tries to strike up a conversation, even trying to link arms. Who does that when you're hardly friends? I just don't understand how she doesn't get the hint, even when I tell her I'm in a rush every single time. Yesterday, I was so stressed, I just snapped. "I'm really in a hurry. I have to go to work." But she just laughed it off as if it was nothing, saying, "But you leave home early, right? A little chat won't hurt." Isn't this a bit too much? My husband leaves for work earlier than I do, so I always wave him off before washing the dishes, gathering the trash around the house, and taking out the garbage before I head to work myself. I wonder if I should adjust my morning routine. The stress from work is nothing compared to the stress Nick's mother gives me, it's exhausting. So I talked to my husband and decided to shift my work hours starting Monday. Then came the weekend. Relaxing at home with my husband on Saturday morning, our doorbell rang. Neither of us were expecting any packages, so we both looked puzzled, but since I was closer, I pressed the intercom button, and there was Nick's mom on the camera, which just stunned me. Noticing my reaction, my husband also peered silently into the camera, and in a voice too low to be heard on the other end, he involuntarily let out a confused, "Huh?" Thinking I couldn't just leave it at that, I responded, but I really couldn't fathom why Nick's mom would come to our house on a day off. "Sorry to bother you, but I've got an emergency. Is now a good time?" "What seems to be the matter?" I felt it was a bad idea to go to the front door, so I decided to find out what she wanted right there and then. I think I sounded incredibly stiff, but as usual, Nick's mom seemed unfazed. "I have an urgent matter and absolutely must leave right now," she started saying hurriedly. The thought that she was about to ask for something bothersome flashed through my mind, and I almost wanted to just hang up, but she kept going on and on without letting me get a word in. "I need you to watch my child for just a little while. I trust you completely, Jennifer, you're so reliable. Please, could you? Huh? Please? I'm begging you. Open the door. It's an emergency. But we don't have anything for children to play with. You're used to it with your niece, aren't you? It'll be fine. There's not much difference between first-grade boys and girls." Nick's mom's momentum was unstoppable, as if she wasn't planning to take no for an answer. "When my niece comes over, her parents are always with her, and she brings her favorite toys in her backpack, so we don't keep children's toys at our place. And there's no way a first-grade boy is going to quietly play inside the house. No matter what you say, it's impossible. It'll be fine, please, I'm begging you." Nick's mom just kept repeating herself no matter how many times I refused, turning the conversation into a never-ending back and forth until I was almost in tears. Then, my husband put his hand on my shoulder and nodded, signaling he'd handle it. "Sorry, but we have plans to go out today as well, so could you please leave?" Well, we didn't actually have plans, but sometimes a white lie is necessary. We need to start getting ready ourselves. "Excuse us, then," and with that, he cut off the intercom without waiting for her to respond. Given her attitude, she wouldn't accept anything that was inconvenient for her. I think my husband's judgment was right. With me, it would have just kept going back and forth, and who knows, she might have just left her son and taken off. Having her come over on a holiday made my husband realize she really was a handful, which was a good thing, but it was also exhausting. After that, I started matching my work hours to my husband's to avoid Nick's mom. It was a bit of a hassle to get the dishes done and prepare everything earlier in the morning, but my husband started doing more of the housework than before, and our relationship improved significantly, so it was a series of good days. And I could avoid meeting Nick's mother at that time. Then, after a while, Sally's mother from another floor suddenly spoke to me. "Jennifer, I heard you were close with Nick's mom. Is everything okay, over there?" "What do you mean? I don't really interact with Nick's mom." "Oh, is that so?" For some reason, Sally's mother had the wrong impression, asking us about something despite the fact that I never got along with Nick's mother and would prefer to avoid her if possible. It turned out that I was told repeatedly by Nick's mother that her son Nick and your niece are in the same class and that you got along very well, but it was all one-sided information. Sorry about that. It seems Nick's mother had been quite proactive even where we didn't know. Shocked by what Sally's mother told me, I became curious about the details, but my husband had left for work by then. "Are you okay, for time, Jennifer?" "Oh, yes. I'm leaving with my husband, so I have a bit more time," I said. "Oh my, what a lovely couple you are. So nice." Sally's mother, always smiling and appearing joyful, seems like a genuinely kind-hearted wife. And speaking of which, about Nick's mother, you know, she's such a good person, looking after her niece and all. I was wondering if she could also take care of my son. I was worried if that would be all right, you know? It could lead to trouble, so I was a bit hesitant. I couldn't admit that I had already been barged in on at home, so I could only respond with a nod of understanding. "And about Nick's mother, since both you and your husband work, right? So I thought maybe you weren't aware." "What about?" I had to ask Sally's mother back, despite the awkwardness, because I was just too curious. Maybe if I hadn't asked then, I could have avoided getting involved later. But at that moment, I just had to ask. Recently, I've been hearing rumors that despite Nick's mother being single, there's been a man coming and going from her place. It's kind of scary, don't you think? Is everything all right? Sally's mother didn't say it directly, but the way she spoke made it clear she suspected something unsavory about the man. Also, lately, Nick has been staying in the park late into the night. Even on weekends, he doesn't seem to return home by lunchtime. I thought maybe you knew something since Nick's mother said you two were close. Oh, is that so? Nick's mother doesn't really talk to me much, it's always her who starts the conversation. We don't really have a personal relationship. Right, you two are quite different, aren't you? I was confused, but I made it clear to Sally's mother that we weren't close. The fact that Nick and my niece are in the same class was something I only found out about recently. Sally's mother seemed satisfied with my explanation. Sometimes, I hear rumors about Nick crying a lot. I hope it's not something like abuse. If you find out anything, please let me know. Sally's mother seemed both concerned and a bit nosy. I was worried about Nick, but I didn't want to get involved with Nick's mother. That night, after work, I told my husband about what Sally's mother had said. We agreed it was best to stay out of Nick's mother's affairs, but I couldn't help feeling a bit guilty and uneasy. I wondered if Nick had been left alone in the park the day she came over with an urgent request. The following weekend, I mentioned the neighborhood gossip to my brother and his wife when we visited them. I hoped to get a different perspective from the school moms, but the new information came not from my sister-in-law but from my niece. Nick has been absent since Thursday. Really? Is he sick? When I asked my niece in surprise, she just shook her head. No, another kid asked the teacher why, but didn't get a clear answer. It's strange, isn't it? Normally, if it's a cold, that's what you'd say. That gave me an uneasy feeling, and I couldn't calm down. I couldn't help but think Nick might be suffering because I refused Nick's mother's request. Seeing me distressed, my husband said, "I kind of get what you're thinking, but there's nothing we can do." Still, I couldn't shake off the unease. If it bothers you that much, let's go home. We can check the nearby park for Nick on the way. I must have looked worried because my husband suggested this, and though it was still early, we decided to head home. I felt bad for my niece, who looked sad to see us go. As we passed the usual park, Nick was nowhere to be seen. Sally's mother mentioned that he doesn't seem to come home even during the day on weekends. I wonder if he's at home. I hope he's had lunch. Talking with my husband, we returned home only to find the door of a neighbor 2 doors down slightly ajar. Our building is well made, but the door latches are a bit stiff, and if not closed properly, they stay partly open. Normally, you'd make sure the door is closed when you lock it, so an open door might mean no one made sure to lock it. We approached the door cautiously, ringing the bell, knocking, and finally calling out, but there was no sign of anyone inside. What should we do? It's hard to believe they left without locking up. Let's open the door and call out again. As my husband said this, he reached out and opened the door. Inside, there was no sound of movement or voices. But what shocked us more was the sight just beyond the open door, women's shoes scattered about and a small figure curled up tightly. "Nick, is that you? Are you okay?" At that moment, Nick was slumped over, unresponsive no matter how much we called out to him. We rushed to call an ambulance. Since Nick's mother wasn't home, we stayed with Nick. At the hospital, the doctor immediately examined Nick and scolded us right off the bat. "How could you leave a child like this until he got in such a state? Do you understand the condition he's in? Malnutrition and dehydration. This is an unthinkable physical state. This is clear abuse. I'm going to have to report this." We were so intimidated by the doctor's fierce attitude that we fell silent. But, we were the ones who saved the boy, yet we're not his parents. It would be a problem if we were reported as the abusive parents suddenly. "Doctor, please wait. We just live nearby and are neither his parents nor his relatives." My husband, as always, spoke calmly and firmly, which is why I always rely on him. The doctor apologized, saying, "Is that so? I jumped to conclusions, I'm very sorry." It was good that we weren't misunderstood. We had explained everything to the ambulance crew, and even talked to the nurses at the hospital. It seems the doctor, upon seeing the child's condition, let the situation get to his head and didn't check properly. Not that I don't think he should have checked. As long as you understand, that's all that matters. But what about his parents? We don't know much about Nick's mother's family, but we shared what rumors we've heard and what my niece told us with the doctor. After hearing this, the doctor, with a determined look in his eyes, firmly said we should definitely report this. Considering Nick's condition, a child abuse report is absolutely necessary. Apparently, Nick hasn't had a proper meal in a long time and is suffering from malnutrition. I thought Nick looked thin the last time we met, but I had no idea it was because he wasn't getting meals at home. He shouldn't just be described as thin, but rather emaciated. And yet, Nick's mother was wearing the latest fashion. I felt extremely uncomfortable. Then, when we returned to our apartment, Sally's mother was waiting outside, anxious for our return. Since we had called an ambulance, word had spread throughout the neighborhood that something had happened. "Jennifer, how is Nick doing?" "I don't know the details, but I heard he's malnourished." "Poor thing." According to Sally's mother, Nick's mother had been out with her boyfriend for a few days, and nobody in the neighborhood had seen her. Did she go out overnight during the week? Probably. It would be okay if she came back at night. I think she hasn't come back. Nick didn't return even after a few days. 2 weeks later. Again on Saturday, our doorbell rang, and it was strange because we weren't expecting any packages. Who could it be? As my husband and I had that familiar conversation, I pressed the doorbell's talk button. Then, a man I didn't recognize appeared, saying, "Sorry to disturb you on your day off. I am Nick's father. I heard my son was under your care recently, and I came to express my gratitude." We were surprised, but opened the door to the well-dressed man. "If it's not too much trouble, may I come in?" "Please, and thank you for saving my son the other day." Once inside, Nick's dad immediately bowed deeply. It seems he came to the neighborhood to make amends for what Nick's mother and Nick had caused. Listening further, Nick's mother and Nick's father got divorced due to her affair. The one frequenting the apartment was her boyfriend at the time, who, according to Sally's mother and other ladies in the neighborhood, appeared to be a dubious man with flashy, suspiciously long hair. The cause of the divorce was my wife's fault, but as a father, I couldn't win custody and wasn't allowed to see my son for nearly 2 years. I never expected things to turn out like this. I've caused you so much trouble this time. Thank you so much. The father seemed to really care about Nick. When you two found my son, my ex-wife was off traveling with her boyfriend, and not just for a quick trip, but right smack in the middle of the week, for 5 days. To my surprise, Nick's mother seemed to have left for a trip on Wednesday, while Nick was at school. Understanding why Nick was crouching at the entrance makes my heart ache all over again. The doctors told me that if the discovery had been delayed any longer, it would have been too late. Thanks to you two for checking in at that moment, my son was saved. Please, let me express my gratitude. We just did what anyone would do, no thanks needed. Exactly. As long as Nick is back to being healthy, that's all that matters. We politely declined the father's offer, asking him instead to just do something that would make Nick happy. With tears in his eyes, Nick's father kept saying, thank you so much," before he left. Of course, it seems Nick was taken in by his father as soon as he was discharged. Later, I heard more about Nick's mother through the neighborhood network, including from Sally's mother. Nick's mother, who was caught cheating when married, seemed not interested in actively raising Nick, but thought she could avoid paying damages to Nick's father by taking custody. Moreover, she demanded child support from her husband and spent it all on herself. It was only natural for Nick to be seen wearing ill-fitting, worn-out clothes. Now that clear evidence of abuse has emerged, Nick is back with his father, and Nick's mother seems to be facing demands for alimony she previously avoided. Unable to pay the rent for her apartment, she apparently moved in with her boyfriend. But, since he's also facing demands for alimony, it's likely they're both strapped for cash. Whether it's because of the money or not, I've heard rumors about Nick's mother being verbally abused by her boyfriend in public, suggesting their relationship is quite strained now. And I heard rumors about domestic violence from her boyfriend, leading to their breakup. What she saw in that man, I just can't understand. After cheating on her husband, neglecting Nick, and then ruining her relationship with her boyfriend, some people really are architects of their own misfortune. Yet, in a way, this ordeal has brought my own family closer together. My husband and I share chores more and leave for work together in the mornings. We treasure each other more and are determined to keep our good relationship going.